Good morning. I'm Barry Andrews, and it is my pleasure to be with you today. For me, this is an anniversary of sorts. Going through some files a couple of weeks ago, I came across this order of service from the University Unitarian Church, dated August 9, 1970, 50 years ago, when I spoke here for the first time as a seminary student. I'm glad to be back. Precautions necessitated by health concerns preclude our gathering together in person, but we appreciate the fact that today's media allow for you to receive this service coming to you from the familiar surroundings of your house of worship. From this house to your home, we welcome you and invite you to join in the celebration of life. I'm joined today by keyboardist Dwight Beckmeyer and soloist Kelly Lindenmeyer. And now, let us have our prelude. Our call to celebration is from Walden by Henry David Thoreau. He writes, "We must learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical aids, but by an infinite expectation of the dawn, which does not forsake us in our soundest sleep. To affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of arts. Every one of us is tasked to make our life, even in its details, worthy of the contemplation of our most elevated and critical hour." Won't you join me in singing our doxology?
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung through every land, by every tongue.
My meditation today is taken from the writings of Gunilla Norris. Within each of us, there is a silence as vast as the universe. When we experience that silence, we remember who we are, creatures of the stars, created from the birth of galaxies, created from the cooling of this planet, created from dust and gas, created from the elements, created from time and space, created from silence. Silence is the source of all that exists, the unfathomable stillness where vibration began, the first oscillation, the first word from which life emerged. Silence is our deepest nature, our home and common ground, our place of peace. When Henry Thoreau built a fireplace in his cabin at Walden Pond, he dedicated it with a poem, a line from which reads, "Go thou my incense upward from this hearth." The poem is a prayer, and the incense an offering, carrying aloft his dreams of a better world, a world in which all are brothers and sisters living in peace, where all are free and none shall be afraid. The smoke from the fire may obscure the stars at night, but the flame is clean. So too our actions fall short of our aspirations, but they arise from a pure heart. Let this then be our prayer. May we be as humble as the smoke, but as virtuous as the fire, knowing that so long as the fire burns, there is hope. Amen. Please join in saying together our words for the offering. This will be followed by our first hymn. We sing of Golden Mornings with lyrics by Ralph Waldo Emerson. This church is a community of ourselves. Its energy and resources are our energy and resources. Its wealth is what we share. When we contribute to the life of this community, we affirm our lives within it. Hardly a day goes by when I fail to see a list of books to read during this time of pandemic and social unrest. The Plague by Albert Camus, Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe, Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and many others. If I were to add one book to these lists, it would be Walden by Henry David Thoreau. I've read Walden many times. It's something like a Bible to me. But rereading it now, in light of all that has happened in the past 6 months, I find more in it to take to heart than ever before. It's one thing to read Walden when all is going well in life. It's invigorating, like a breath of fresh air. But what does it have to say to us today when we are faced with multiple challenges? COVID-19, police violence, global warming, governmental failure, each one critical in its own way. Thoreau doesn't offer simple advice to deal with any of these difficult issues. He would say that they require radical solutions. In botany, the word radical refers to the root of a plant. Thus, Thoreau insists that we examine the roots of these problems. I know the past 6 months have been a momentously disruptive period affecting all of us in different ways. None of us living today have ever experienced anything quite like it. This is a time for taking action and for voting in the most important election of our lifetime. But it is also a time for introspection and personal stock-taking. One thing we have in common during these past few months is sheltering in place. Cut off from the outside world, the workplace, and the school, we have felt disoriented, untethered from the schedules and routines of everyday life. We seem to be floating in space and drifting in time. It's hard for us to imagine what our lives will be like 6 months or even a year from now. It's been a challenge to establish new routines, working from home, schooling online, socially distancing, caring for loved ones, wearing our masks as we cautiously venture out into the world in search of food and fresh air. It may be difficult to view our experience this way, but we have also been given a gift, an opportunity to re-examine our values and life choices in a radical way. Economy is the first and longest chapter of Walden. Seems like an odd way to begin a book on life in the woods. But Thoreau loves wordplay, and the question he raises here is, how are we spending our lives? Metaphorically speaking, this chapter presents the diagnosis of a dis-ease for which the rest of the book offers a cure. What is this dis-ease we suffer from? Ordinarily, we lead very busy lives, in the course of which we seldom pause to consider why we do what we are doing. On one level, what we are doing makes perfect sense. We are expected to work and provide for our families. We need recreation and cultural enrichment. But all too often, we find ourselves stretched beyond our financial and emotional means. Struggling with multiple demands, we feel stressed out and sometimes depressed. Thoreau identifies the 4 necessities of life: food, shelter, clothing, and heat. He said, not till we have secured these are we prepared to entertain the true problems of life with freedom and a prospect of success. He raises 2 questions with respect to these necessities. The first is, how much of each do we need? Fuel, for example, is necessary for warmth, but once we are warm, how much more heat do we need? The pandemic forces us to address this question directly, but from the opposite end. Not how much do we need, but what can we do without? For many years, I went to the gym several times a week and paid a monthly fee for doing so. Now that I exercise in my home and out of doors, it's unlikely that I will ever return to the gym. I've always enjoyed eating at restaurants. Now that I've discovered the pleasures of cooking, I'm less inclined to dine out. Out of necessity, my wife and I have cut back in all sorts of ways, some of them permanently. But it doesn't feel like a loss to me. It's more a sense of relief. The second question Thoreau asks is a more difficult one. Granted that we have these necessities, what is their purpose beyond mere survival? The question here is not how much, but why. The answer is so that we and those we love and care about might flourish and lead better lives. Consider the familiar Thoreau quote, "I say, beware of all enterprises that require new clothes." The rest of that saying is, rather than a new wearer of clothes. Who we are is more important than what we wear. The same can be said of the other necessities as well. What good is a big house and a fancy car if we are dissatisfied with our life, wondering if we've made the right choices? The point Thoreau is trying to make is this. When we have obtained those things which are necessary to life, there is another alternative than to obtain the superfluities, and that is to adventure on life now, our vacation from humbler toil having commenced. When was the last time we thought of our lives as an adventure rather than a pursuit of never-ending satisfaction? Most of the luxuries and many of the so-called comforts of life, Thoreau insisted, are not only not indispensable, but positive hindrances to the elevation of mankind. In proportion as we simplify our lives, we discover that inward riches count for more than outward wealth. It is well known that Thoreau went to Walden Pond seeking solitude and the solace of nature. He made social distancing a part of his spiritual practice. The solitude and social distancing we have experienced in the past 6 months are not of our own choosing. We feel cut off and isolated from friends and families and social activities in the outside world. After a while, even reading on our iPads and watching Netflix becomes boring. Perhaps this imposed isolation can also be seen as a gift, a time in which we might engage in some form of spiritual practice. Thoreau describes his own spiritual practice in Walden, consisting of contemplation, reading, journal writing, sauntering in the out of doors, and simple living. For us, it might consist of meditating, quilting, writing poetry, painting, cooking, listening to music, or cultivating awareness in other ways. In my neighborhood walks, I've been more fully aware of nature coming in this year than ever before. The colors and scents of flowers seem more vivid, and the air more pure. Indeed, nature is a panacea that never fails to lift the spirits, and Thoreau spent half of every day wandering in the woods and fields surrounding his native village. There can be no very black melancholy to him who lives in the midst of nature and has his senses still, he wrote. We don't need to go far to find nature. Boulevards, city parks, and backyards can give us what we need. My own backyard is quite small, but it is shaded with trees, bushes, and plants of various kinds. Nestled in amongst them is a small brick patio where in good weather I can read, contemplate, and listen to birds as they flit from branch to branch. This time of isolation can feel constricting in the sense that we are caught between a past that provides no precedent for our predicament and a future unlike anything we could have imagined just a few months ago. We are condemned, as it were, to live in the present. Perhaps we can view this as a gift also. God himself culminates in the present moment and will never be more divine in all the ages, Thoreau said. and we are enabled to apprehend at all what is sublime and noble only by the perpetual instilling and drenching of the reality that surrounds us. We exist only in the eternal now, and the more time we spend living in the past or worrying about the future, the less time there is to truly enjoy the one life we have. This is Thoreau's gospel according to this moment. Lest we think Thoreau's advice is sentimental and superficial, coming from a man who never married, who spent his days living in the woods while his mother washed his laundry, consider that the times he lived in were every bit as challenging as our own. Hanging over everything was the pall of slavery and the efforts to end it. A series of bank failures and financial crises from the 1830s to the 1850s led to lengthy recessions and widespread unemployment. Tuberculosis, a silent plague, was the leading cause of death in Concord in the first half of the 19th century. Thoreau himself died from it at the age of 44. His father and grandfather succumbed to it, as well as one of his sisters. Despite all of this, Thoreau never ceased to be hopeful, even in the final months of his life. "I do not propose to write an ode to dejection," he announced in Walden, "but to brag as lustily as Chanticleer in the morning, standing on his roost, if only to wake my neighbors up." Waking up, awareness, is the key to happiness in Thoreau's view. For him, there was always more day to dawn. The sun, he said, is but a morning star. The pandemic and the country's political situation have put an enormous strain on us as individuals and the country as a whole. There is tremendous anxiety and uncertainty, and it cannot be wished away. Amidst all of these challenges, and along with our efforts to do something about them, whether marching in the streets, casting our votes, or donating to charities, we must find reason for hope. In a late manuscript on the dispersion of seeds, not published until a few years ago, Thoreau wrote, "Though I do not believe that a plant will spring up where no seed has been, I have great faith in a seed. Convince me that you have a seed there, and I am prepared to expect wonders." Hope springs where the seeds of hope are sown. We ourselves must plant and nurture them. And now, won't you join in singing our closing hymn, "The Beauty of the Earth."
Sing we our joy.
That lovely hymn was not for the beauty of the earth. It was for the earth forever turning. My closing words, my benediction for this morning, is also taken from the writing of Henry Thoreau's Walden. If the day and night are such that you greet them with joy, and life emits a fragrance like flowers and sweet-scented herbs, is more elastic, more starry, more immortal, that is your success. All nature is your congratulation, and you have cause momentarily to bless yourself. So may it be.